바쁘들 테지.
Here's hoping that there won't be a 41st move.
30년 동안이나 그렇게 이사를 30번씩 하고 또 아무 말 없이 짐을 꿋꿋이 잘 싸주고 그래서 너무 고마워.
그냥 같이 있으면 좋아요.
진짜.
예.
여기서 오래오래 살자.
Love does not consist of gazing at each other, but in looking outward in the same direction. By looking outward in the same direction, may you dwell in this house for a long time.
Curious about Korean cultural heritage?
If you are a fan of Korean culture and history, listen up. Korean cultural heritage is based on a 5,000-year history.
The whole country is like a massive museum because it possesses such diverse cultural properties. Let's not wait any longer and take a look.
First, for beginners, for those who are not familiar with Korea, let's start with the world-famous list.
You can see how Korea's beautiful traditional patterns and historical features have been preserved.
And don't forget to experience Korea's intangible cultural heritage. From 강강술래 to 탈춤, there's just so many exciting cultural heritages to experience.
These are for intermediate level tourists who have already visited Korea and its famous attractions. You might even be standing in a World Heritage Site right now.
How about searching for intangible cultural heritage that you can experience? 한소리, 제주 해녀 diving, 김장. Make some unforgettable memories while having fun.
Last but not least, the advanced level. It's the memory of the World Register. Korea possesses an extensive documentary heritage. Korea is serious about documentation and preservation.
A tour of Korean cultural heritage will become a legacy of your own.
Why not make your own Korean cultural heritage travel itinerary?
Isn't it fascinating?
Travel creates new experiences and unforgettable memories. Through landscapes, food, scents, and textures, it awakens and satisfies our senses. The endless joy and inspiration of traveling.
The DP's Lee Jae-myung was in the liberal stronghold of Jeollanam-do province today, stressing the need for balanced regional growth. The PPP's Kim Moon-soo was in the capital, apologizing over the martial law incident as he rolled out his education vision on Teachers' Day. And the Reform Party's Lee Jun-seok was meeting younger voters in Seoul as he had lunch with college students. The two-day meeting of trade ministers from the Asia-Pacific region kicked off today in Korea's Jeju. What's grabbing attention is a series of sideline talks with the U.S. amid the Trump administration's tariff campaign. Russia and Ukraine are sitting down in Istanbul for peace talks over the war that's been dragging on for over 3 years. Direct talks between Putin and Zelensky are unlikely to take place. It's May 15th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Min. On the fourth day of official campaigning, Liberal Party candidate Lee Jae-myung continued his trek across the country, this time to his party's stronghold. His message there was directed towards balanced regional growth. Our correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
After spending the past few days trying to win support in traditionally conservative strongholds, Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung focused on rallying support in his party's stronghold. Lee's campaign on Thursday took him through Jeollanam-do province, including the cities of Gwangyang, Yeosu, Suncheon, and Bokpo. Kicking off his tour of this region, Lee pointed to the concentration of power in the capital area as the biggest problem South Korea was facing. He emphasized balanced regional development, which is one of his 10 major campaign pledges. In line with this, he highlighted fostering the renewable energy industry as a pledge tailored to the Jeollado provinces, saying the southwest coast holds great potential for renewables.
We don't have a clear plan for renewables yet as we move away from fossil fuels due to global warming. Energy prices are likely to go up, so we need to develop our own resources. That's why I think we should actively grow the renewable energy industry, especially in the southwestern coast and Jeollado provinces.
During his visit to Yeosu, Lee outlined his energy plan, pledging to turn the Jeollanam-do coast into a global renewable energy hub by building a so-called energy highway. He said the region has plenty of resources but lacks transmission lines, promising to fix the issue and unlock the area's full energy potential.
Why can't we build a country with balanced regional development where companies come for local renewable energy? With Lee Jae-myung's leadership, we can change the nation, just like we saw in Seongnam and Gyeonggi-do, and just like the DP has changed.
Ahead of his rally in the party's stronghold, he visited Hadong, Gyeongsangnam-do province, near the border between Jeollado and Gyeongsang-do provinces. There, he met with young people at Hwage Market to discuss concerns about jobs, housing, and childcare. The choice of location and participants from different regions reflected Lee's intention to promote regional harmony. Lee will continue his campaign on Friday in Jeollabuk-do province, visiting the cities of Iksan and Jeonju. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
The Conservative Party candidate Kim Moon-soo was back in Seoul after his 3-day tour of the southeast.
as he rolled out his visions on various issues, including education. The controversy over the martial law incident seems to be far from over. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
Returning to Seoul on Thursday after a 3-day tour of the Southeast, People Power Party presidential candidate Kim Moon-soo kept a low profile, with no major rallies, possibly taking time to regroup at his campaign headquarters. But attention quickly turned to a familiar issue, the legacy of impeached former President Yoon Suk-yeol and his declaration of martial law. Kim, at a press conference, issued a second public apology.
So I sincerely and respectfully apologize to those struggling to make a living outside of the capital region, to many whose lives have become more difficult, to those feeling weighed down or disheartened, and to all affected by the deepening divisions in public opinion.
Kim was also asked about whether Yoon should be expelled from the party. He responded that the decision to leave rests solely with Yoon. That came after newly appointed interim leader Kim Yong-tae said in a morning interview that expulsion could be on the table and that he plans to personally suggest that Yoon step down. Some in the party agree, arguing that distancing from Yoon is critical to winning over undecided voters who are largely critical of the martial law controversy. Meanwhile, the PPP continued its attacks on rival Lee Jae-myung, this time by protesting outside the Supreme Court. The party accuses the Democratic Party of pressuring the judiciary branch after the Supreme Court ruled against Lee in his election violation case and sent it back to a lower court for a guilty verdict. The DP has since moved to summon Chief Justice Cho Lee-dae for a hearing, started pushing for a special probe, and is even reviewing a possible impeachment.
They say democracy is about the rule of law. But have you ever seen anything so absurd? A criminal threatening a judge, summoning a judge for a hearing, launching a special investigation into a judge, or even trying to impeach a judge. Have you ever heard of such madness?
On the policy front, Kim marked Teachers' Day by unveiling his education pledges, including bringing AI into classrooms and restoring teachers' authority, saying excessive student protections have weakened discipline, while also strengthening public education. He also appealed his diplomatic skills as he met interim U.S. Ambassador Joseph Yoon. While the discussion remains private, Kim's chief of staff said they talked candidly about the Korean Peninsula and tariff issues. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Also on the campaign trail, Reform Party candidate Lee Jae-myung sat down with students at Seoul National University of Education in light of Teachers' Day today. The talks took place over lunch as he continued his campus cafeteria outreach to college students. Earlier today, he announced prison reform, proposing inmates participate in higher value labor, such as machinery assembly and digital operations, rather than tasks like sawing and cleaning. He added such labor would serve to raise the standard of economic and social contribution by those incarcerated. Meanwhile, in response to inquiry about a coalition with the main conservative camp, he condemned those seeking, quote, political engineering. As the country prepares to elect its next president, one particular theme is consistent across all major campaigns, though their approaches may differ: the economy. We now turn to our economics correspondent Moon Hae-ryun for this topic. Hae-ryun, the economy does seem to take a central role in the race just like in the past, but anything worth noticing this time?
So South Korea is currently grappling with a slowing economic growth and global uncertainty stemming from U.S. trade policies. Recent data has shown that the country's economy shrank in the first quarter of the year, and economic institutions at home and abroad are revising down their economic projections for South Korea this year. As a result, both candidates are presenting themselves as the one best equipped to stabilize the economy and prepare for long-term competitiveness. But beyond that, experts point out something very strategic, not just what the candidates are promising, but how they're presenting it.
What voters should pay attention to isn't just the substance of the pledges, but the level of priority they're given. Where a candidate places an issue, whether it ranks first or 10th, tells us a great deal about what they're really focused on.
So when AI shows up as Lee Jae-myung's #1 pledge and as Kim Mun-soo's second, it sends a clear message about what they each see as central to Korea's economic future.
Now, let's talk about that. So how do their AI strategies compare?
So both candidates are currently proposing to invest 100 trillion Korean won, approximately $71 billion, signaling the scale of their ambitions. But the way they plan to use that funding is quite different.
We need to take a look at what role our national community should play in preparing for an AI-driven society.
For the initial takeoff, we need to pour in concentrated funding and scout top talent from around the world.
Lee Jae-myung emphasizes public access. His AI for All initiative would offer citizens free advanced AI services, including a Korean-made version of ChatGPT. He also pledges to secure over 50,000 high-performance GPUs and establish a national AI data cluster. Meanwhile, Kim Mun-soo proposes a public-private fund to foster AI unicorn firms and expand industry talent. And he has very specific targets for talent. He plans to train 200,000 young AI professionals through expanded graduate programs and software-centered universities. In terms of regulation, they overlap in principle. Both agree that Korea's current regulatory framework is lagging behind. Lee wants to use special exemptions to help AI-convergent industries grow more quickly. Kim, on the other hand, talks about aligning AI regulation with global standards and conducting impact assessment before new rules are introduced. It's a recognition that if Korea wants to compete with the likes of the US or China, it can't afford red tape that slows down innovation. And worth mentioning there, although less prominent in the polls, is Lee Jae-myung, the former People Power Party leader, now running as a third-party candidate. His AI vision calls for a dramatic reduction in state intervention and wants market-driven AI innovation, with stronger digital sovereignty and open-source infrastructure at the core. His stance appeals to younger, more tech-literate voters, but lacks the large-scale public investment strategies the other two are promising.
Now let's move to another key area of concern, that is trade. Do they differ there too?
Very much so. So trade actually centers around Kim Mun-soo's first pledge, and he's proposing a reset of Korea's trade strategy, starting with an immediate South Korea-US summit and new negotiations on tariffs. It's a very proactive, outward-facing plan. Lee Jae-myung is more focused on domestic resilience. While he acknowledges the need to adapt to the global economic order, he doesn't emphasize alliances or trade pacts in the same way. Instead, he prioritizes homegrown innovation and economic self-reliance in line with his vision of building a more robust domestic economy that's less vulnerable to external shocks. Lee Jae-myung again takes a different line. He supports a decentralized, tech-led foreign trade approach, advocating for the use of blockchain in customs, logistics, and trade settlement to reduce dependence on geopolitical dynamics.
Thank you for the report, Hae-ryun.
Thank you for having me.
Trade officials of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation kicked off their two-day meeting in Korea's Jeju today against the backdrop of tougher trade conditions in light of U.S. tariffs. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Yoon-ji has the latest.
Top trade officials from 21 Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation member states, including the U.S. and China, have gathered on Jeju Island ahead of the APEC Leaders Summit later this year. Led by South Korea's Minister for Trade Chung In-gyu, this is the first time in 20 years that the country is hosting the APEC Trade Ministers meeting.
I hope today's MRT meeting will lay a solid foundation for dialogue and collaboration to overcome the political and economic challenges as well as uncertainties that we encounter.
On the sidelines of the event, Chung held a bilateral meeting with China's top trade envoy Lee Jae-myung and also sat down for talks with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer on Thursday evening. Greer is also set to meet South Korea's Minister of Trade, Industry and Energy An Deok-gun on Friday. The two officials last met in Washington 3 weeks ago, where South Korea requested exemptions from reciprocal tariffs while offering cooperation on shipbuilding and energy. Both sides are currently working to produce a package of deals to remove new U.S. tariffs before the July 8th deadline, when the 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs is lifted.
This year's event especially drew a lot of attention as major APEC member countries are seeking trade deals with the United States after President Trump announced a sweeping set of tariffs in April.
With trade officials from the U.S. and China both here in Jeju, a meeting between them on Thursday afternoon was also closely watched, as this could be seen as a potential move to make further progress to address trade friction. This comes after the world's two largest economies agreed last weekend in Geneva to temporarily lower most tariffs in a bid to defuse the trade war. 배은지, Arirang News, Jeju.
Today, May 15th is Teacher's Day here in South Korea. And at one special school, students from a North Korean background whose guardians went to great lengths to offer them a new lease on life are sharing their own gratitude. Our Kim Jong-sil has the story.
At first glance, it looks like any other Teacher's Day celebration in South Korea. Students handing over carnations, writing thank you notes, and singing songs for their teachers. But at this school, those small gestures carry a different weight. Hangyeole Middle and High in Gyeonggi-do Province is the only school in South Korea dedicated to students from North Korean backgrounds, whether they arrived themselves or were born to defectors, sometimes even in third countries along the way.
Here at Hangyeole School, where all the students come from North Korean backgrounds, Teacher's Day may seem like any other, but it also reflects how they're adjusting to life here in the South.
It wouldn't be fun if they knew, so we planned it all in secret. That made it way better.
These teachers honestly feel like lifesavers to me. I don't usually get to thank them, so this was my chance.
It's more than a surprise event. It's a milestone in their journey of adapting to a new culture and life.
I hope this stays with them as a good memory. And maybe one day they'll pass it on to their own students.
With 115 students enrolled, 31 in the middle school, Hangyeole offers more than academics. Teachers here often step in as mentors and guardians, helping students bridge two very different worlds.
We follow the national curriculum, but also help students adjust socially, emotionally, and for the future. Some still speak with a North Korean accent, but they're finding their place here with confidence.
Named after the word for one people, Hangyeole is more than just a school. It's a place where students with North Korean backgrounds begin to shape new lives. For them, this is one of many moments helping to build that life in the South. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
Peace talks are scheduled for Thursday in Istanbul, hoping to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. That's been dragging on for over 3 years. But a meeting between Putin and Zelensky looks unlikely. Lee Seung-jae has more.
After remaining silent on who's headed to Istanbul for peace talks with Ukraine, the Kremlin has finally announced the list of officials taking part. The delegation will be led by presidential aide Vladimir Medinsky, who was present at the first attempt at peace talks in Istanbul back in March 2022. Along with Medinsky, Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Galuzin, Deputy Defense Minister Alexander Fomin, and the chief of Russia's military intelligence agency, Igor Kostyakov, will also be at the talks. Not on the list, though, is Russian President Vladimir Putin, who many speculated could be involved in direct talks. Despite a much-anticipated sit-down between Putin and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, no such talks appear to be on the horizon. With Putin seemingly out of the picture, U.S. President Donald Trump has also decided not to go to Istanbul. According to Reuters on Wednesday, citing a Trump administration official, Trump has decided to skip the peace talks. The U.S. leader has said over the past week that he was considering coming to mediate talks, raising hopes for a trilateral summit between the leaders of the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine. Zelensky had called on both leaders to come to Istanbul and also said the presence of Trump could have a major impact on the negotiations. 이승재, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump was in Doha as part of his Middle East trip, where he has sealed major deals with Qatar for defense and the economy. Shin Se-byuk has the details.
U.S. President Donald Trump, currently on a 4-day Gulf tour, signed a series of major security and economic agreements worth at least $1.2 trillion with Qatar on Wednesday. This came after Trump signed a similar multi-billion-dollar deal with Saudi Arabia the day before. According to the White House, the package aims to boost U.S. exports and attract foreign investment in exchange for enhanced security cooperation. The package includes a record-breaking deal for American aircraft maker Boeing to supply Qatar Airways.
From Boeing, that's the largest order of jets in the history of Boeing. That's pretty good. It's over $200 billion, but 160 in terms of the jets. That's fantastic. So that's a record, Kelly.
The White House said the plane contract between the two countries is expected to support some 154,000 American jobs annually. Additionally, U.S. energy engineering firm McDermott has entered into a partnership with Qatar Energy to develop critical energy infrastructure through 7 projects worth $8.5 billion. Defense deals were also part of the package. Raytheon secured a contract worth $1 billion to bolster Qatar's drone defense capabilities. And General Atomics signed an agreement worth $2 billion to supply the Gulf state with unmanned military aircraft. The White House added that both sides signed a letter of intent to strengthen security cooperation, including support for Qatar's air and maritime defense systems and burden sharing at the Al Udeid Air Base, which is the largest U.S. military base in the region. Trump is set to conclude his trip on Thursday with a final stop in the United Arab Emirates. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
South Korea's Data Protection Authority has fined Chinese e-commerce platform Temu for transferring user data overseas without prior notification. The Personal Information Protection Commission fined Temu some 1.37 billion won, or about $980,000 on Thursday. Temu shared personal information such as names, addresses, purchase histories, and customs codes required for customs clearance to companies in 10 countries, including China and Singapore. Under the Personal Information Protection Act, if a company needs to entrust or store personal information overseas to fulfill a contract, it must either disclose this in its privacy policy or notify the user by email. Early summer like it is off a bit with some rain today. This rain will continue mainly in the south tomorrow. In particular, heavy rain will be concentrated around Jeju Island and the south coast. In the mountainous areas of Jeju Island, there will be strong rain of around 20 to 30 millimeters per hour.
Showers are forecast around the central parts of the country tomorrow afternoon. The amount of rainfall is not large, with around 5 to 20 millimeters, but there's a possibility of sudden heavy rain or gusty winds, thunder, lightning, and hail. Tomorrow morning's Seoul and Chuncheon will start off at 16 degrees Celsius, Busan and Gyeongju at 17 degrees. Highs will move up to 24 degrees in Seoul and Chuncheon, 20 degrees in Busan. Clear and warm spring weather will come back on Sunday throughout the country. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next. Travel creates new experiences and unforgettable memories. Through landscapes, food, scents, and textures, it awakens and satisfies our senses. The endless joy and inspiration of traveling.
제21대 대통령 재외선거.
세계 어느 곳에 있어도
내가 국가대표라는 마음으로
누구보다 땀 흘리죠.
지금이 국가대표임을
보여줄 기회. 대한민국 국민의 권리.
대한민국 국민의 의무.
반드시 투표합니다. 국가를 위한 대통령 투표. 제21대 대통령 재외선거. 중앙선거관리위원회.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-kyeon. With just 19 days to go before South Korea's 21st presidential election on June 3rd, the race is intensifying, not just between the candidates, but also in the minds of voters still weighing their choices. Lee Jae-myung of the Democratic Party is currently leading in national polls, while Kim Moon-soo of the People Power Party and Lee Jun-suk of the minor New Reform Party are both vying to reshape the conservative field in very different ways. But beyond party lines, this election is taking place in the long shadow of a constitutional crisis, rising economic anxiety, and growing public demand for trustworthy leadership. Tonight, we delve into what's really driving this race, how voters are shifting, and what the candidates are proposing for the next administration. For this, we are joined by attorney An Jun-sung here in the studio with us. Welcome.
Thank you.
And also joining us online is Choi Han-san, professor of public administration at Myeongji University. Great to see you.
Good evening.
So, Professor Che, let's begin with the overall picture first. The Democratic Party's Lee Jae-myung seems to be leading in major polls lately, but Korean elections often shift dramatically in the final days. So based on your past observations, how reliable do you think are these early numbers, and what kind of voter movement typically happens in the final stretch?
Is there a surprise or not in this 2025 presidential election? That is a very interesting question. I think that there won't be a surprise, I think, but Lee Jae-myung has maintained a steady lead in the poll since former President Yoon Suk-yeol impeachment. So today's poll conducted by the MBS, Lee Jae-myung 49% and Kim Moon-soo 27%. I think 22% difference according to the Joseon Ilbo. So I think this is a very critical numbers. I think right now. Also, the Lee Jae-myung has a big support from the consolidated liberal base, but while the Kim Moon-soo, the conservative, the vote is still fractured. So I think the 18 days left is not a short period of time, but you cannot say easily something happened like a big surprise. But polling the blackouts during the final 6 days of this campaign mean the late voter shift cannot be fully measured, especially like youth or the undecided or independents. So I think that still there are some chance, but I cannot see right now any sign or signals some big surprise happen in the remaining time.
Right, so it's still early to tell, and as of now, there aren't as big signals for a change. Now, staying with the electoral map, Attorney An, Kim Moon-soo and Lee Jun-suk, who are both conservative candidates, have decided to run separately. So in practice, how do Korean voters usually respond to these kinds of divided field? Do you think they consolidate around one candidate or still hold their ground?
Well, I guess so, as the Professor Cho mentioned, that it's kind of early to predict, and we have 90 days, so it's kind of a long time in the election period. And throughout the South Korean, political history, consolidation of candidates has been a hard issue. So every time there's a nationwide election, such as the presidential election this time, and there are people with, looking at, watching closely what really happened, whether the consolidation of candidate happens. But very interesting, if you look at carefully what really happened after consolidation, each cases, the results are not quite promising, and sometimes it worked very well, and sometimes it didn't work so. So it's really case-by-case situation. That means that the candidates will be carefully select what to do, whether or not they consolidate or not. It depends on the situation. So what Professor Cho mentioned is that because the recent poll, I think that the Lee Jae-myung, three candidate setting, Lee Jae-myung about average 48%, and then Kim Moon-soo has about 30% average, on average, right? Some polls showing 33%, some is 27%. And then lastly, the Lee Jae-myung is about 7% on average. So even if you add up both conservative candidates, that's about 10%, at least 10% below the Lee Jae-myung. So it's quite, I guess that it's not really big advantage for any the conservative candidate to, I don't think there's a very strong incentive for any candidate to consolidate because they want to win the game, not just become a loser, just after joining. So there's issue also. Plus, more importantly, that many voters or the Korean people remember what happened last weekend at PPP, and then some of leaders of PPP, unilaterally, attempted to replace Kim Moon-soo with Han Duk-soo. That's really bad signal to the undecided group and then independent groups. I think that's really big impact because any sign of further attempt to consolidate the candidate in the near future might be a negative impact, more negative impact to the undecided group or the independent groups, right?
Right, so it's not really always helpful to put all the eggs in one basket. Right, and now the question will be whether the split will energize or fracture the base. Now, all of this is happening against this very particular backdrop, Attorney An. This is a presidential election that follows a constitutional crisis and, of course, the martial law controversy from the former President Yoon Suk-yeol. How has this shaped the public's expectations about leadership or trust in political institutions?
That's a very interesting question because I ask myself, and I guess sometimes it's very difficult to answer that kind of question because you've got a big picture. But I think that after the December 3rd martial law declaration and then the eventual impeachment of former President Yoon Suk-yeol, and the Korean public has learned some lesson from it, right? I think that now people are looking for new leadership. We hear the term new leadership doesn't mean new people, right? It means the new standard should be applied to the president. So I think about the main, maybe perhaps three major standards should be applied for the new president. The first one is the moral and ethical standard. It's very interesting to see, if you look at the Yoon Suk-yeol, right, he's the former chief prosecutor of South Korea, right? He knows what the legal system, he knows the best of it, and he knows the dark side and any bright side, everything inside out. And then the problem, what happened was that, there's some people saying that the reason he declared a martial law because he tried to prevent, the prosecution against his wife, and some issues about family issues keep coming, and mother-in-law and brother-in-law and wife, and so much family issues. And to me, it's to other international observers, looks like a nepotism issue, some team nepotism, and transparency issues. That's really now Korean public looking at, we need something higher standard, something higher than legal standard. Because when you say legal standard, it means that you have to prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, saying that legally prove it. That's very difficult and time consuming. So now I think Lee Jae-myung having similar situation because there's litigation going on, criminal and civil litigation. That's things people looking at. I think that might be the main factor on this election is that moral and ethical standards should be applied. And the other thing is the communication skill. That's really, I felt very sorry for the Yoon Suk-yeol, and I feel also actually I feel very bad for Yoon Suk-yeol because I think he's the worst president in Korean history, had the worst communicator. And very often I was confused what he's trying to say. And sometimes, and there's a plus, and then maybe, you don't have to be really good speaker or speech or good speaker or the presenter. You can hire good team, right? But I think that my impression was that whatever bad thing happened to Yoon Suk-yeol administration, and he kind of messed up, and then the people working for him, it even make it worse. They don't even know how to handle the situation. That's really bad. I think that's the next president and the future president should have a better communication skill. And lastly, and the national unity. Previously, Korea is historically very politically divided country. So it's a north and south, and even south, southwest, and southeast, right? So divided. So it has for past several decades, right? And whoever get division, take advantage of a division, they got take advantage and they got elected, and they use the same strategy throughout their term. But however, now we're saying that it should be something different, something someone who bridges the gap. So something united people. I think that's a really key factor people look at it from the next president.
So higher moral standards, better communication skills, and national unity. Now, let's also talk about voters who often shape the outcome. Younger and independent voters have shown more flexible voting patterns in recent elections. Sometimes they shift from parties based on specific issues or policies. Professor Che, how are campaigns this year trying to reach these voters, and do you expect them to play a decisive role again?
Yeah, I think that both Lee Jae-myung and Kim Moon-soo has prioritized young and independent voters as a key swing blocks. Especially Lee Jae-myung promised housing for the youth and the military, the service credit toward their careers, and the 4.5 days work week. I think that is a very good message. Especially recently, he also tried to focus on the unity message. I think the independent youth, maybe they like to hear unity, because we are very fractured, but it is time to we are united. Kim Moon-soo also very ambitiously for the youth and the independent, and especially youth. He focused on the reduced student loans and the housing plan and special policy for the youth job protection and pension reform. I think that's very attractive. So both candidates has a very attractive promise. I think we can see the polls show that Lee Jae-myung is leading strongly among the youth, young voters and the independent, and unfortunately Kim Moon-soo is still remain only for the older conservatives. So maybe 19 days, 18 days left. How the Kim can manage that is the key. I think that recently the recent vote is especially presidential election in the 2017 and 2022. The youth vote is a really swing the vote. So I think it's very critical. So I think that this year 2025 also youth very important part of the election.
Right. So indeed, these young and swing voters may not really follow traditional party lines, but they could really still tip the scale. Now, let's also touch upon the policy front, Professor Che. The three main candidates offer distinct visions for the economy. Lee Jae-myung supports large-scale public investment. Kim Moon-soo promotes tax cuts and deregulation, and Lee Jun-suk emphasizes local wage flexibility and leaner government. How do these policies reflect their different philosophies on economic recovery?
Yeah, they are different. Also, they are very distinctive models. Lee Jae-myung proposed the growth plus social equality, while Kim Moon-soo says market-driven maybe economy. Also, Lee Jun-suk focus on the structural reform, reduce the ministry, something like that. I think Lee Jae-myung maybe focus on the maybe recovery, because we are now the very critical and crisis time. He says maybe 100 trillion Korean won AI and the tech investment and the green growth and housing support and 4.5 days work week, and he tried to maybe transformative the growth maybe through the maybe government intervention. But while the Kim Moon-soo more like a market-oriented, he says lowering tax and then maybe easing the regulation and then more freedom for the business, and this kind of the issue maybe also very attractive for the market. Probably the Kim tried to minimize the state role, and that he tried to put the market. I think Lee Jun-suk is a very unique idea. I think why he says keep saying about the reduced maybe the ministries and then the small government. Maybe he focused on the efficiency. I think that this is a very long-term idea, but still Lee Jae-myung has a very attractive ideas. Maybe many voters thinking about Lee Jae-myung, Kim Mun-soo, or the Lee Jae-myung. Yeah.
Right. So from big government spending to deregulation to structural reform, these economic blueprints reveal, very differing governing styles, of course. Now, staying with economy, another area of wide divergence is pension reform, of course. Attorney An, Lee Jae-myung wants to improve the current model. Kim Mun-soo backs automatic adjustment systems, and Lee Jae-myung proposes a dual-track overhaul. So from a governance standpoint, how feasible do you think all of these are?
That's a very interesting question because the National Assembly passed the amendment to the National Pension Act, which will be effective from next year, January 1st. And in that amendment, actually, the key point was that you pay more and get paid more, the idea is. So the problem here, the government is facing is that who's going to pay more and who's going to get paid more. That becomes a generational divide here. So just what Professor Choi mentioned several times, these teenagers and young voters is a swing voter traditionally, and they are very sensitive about the pension reform because it will affect. And then the three different approach made by the three different candidates, but they're not. They're saying something, but I'm not sure whether they really solve the problem issue because that we running out of money. The pension money is running out not because of overspending. It's more like because of the society is changing. The population is decreasing so fast, and that the trend will be. It's supposed to be continue to decrease for time being, means that we will be facing even worse problem in 5-10 years later. So we'll have to see what happens. So, for example, Lee Jae-myung say you want to improve the current model. Yes, sure. But I think one of the things he mentioned is they try to ease the burden on the next generation, younger generation, so creating more credit to the youth, right? So if you go to serve army, you get the serve army credit, and if you get married and new family, we give you a new family credit, and then sometimes if you're the young first timers, we give you, basically you waive your duty to pay pensions, something like they give the benefit to try to give more benefit back to the payer generation. Well, however, the Kim Mun-soo case, because I think that his party is really focused on the senior classes, I guess they're focused on payee classes, seniors, right? Over 60s and 70s, because they basically saying that automatic adjustment means that sounds very academic, but I don't think it's realistic because that we regionally assume at this moment that Korean population will decrease even faster in the future. So that in that sense means that the next generation will have the heavier burden and heavier. So if you say automatic adjustment, the current senior level will get paid enough, but the payer level, the younger generation, will be suffer more. That's really bad for the young, generation. I think he's going to lose a lot of vote because they got only 20% because of this kind of policy, I think. And lastly, Lee Jae-myung, I'm not sure whether you really understand the situation. Dual track, you're dividing the national fund not in half. I don't think that's really, I think it's a bad idea, really, because you running out of the money already, you divide it, and it will get worse. You try to get focus on something, and I think maybe try to increase the base. Maybe that's the idea. I think the more regional. But if you divide it, not even half, it will increase the generation divide. The serious situation. I think that's very more concerning.
Right. So it seems all of these candidates have very different points of views, and pension reform, of course, is very urgent, but it's going to be really hard to structurally make changes on that. Now, let's also touch upon environmental leadership. Professor Choi, Lee Jae-myung pledges to phase out coal and expand renewables. Kim Mun-soo emphasizes nuclear energy and climate resilience. Well, Lee Jae-myung has not really released a formal climate or energy policy yet. How might these differences shape South Korea's environmental direction?
I think the Lee Jae-myung proposed the decarbonization and then the more increased renewable energy is which fit to the global trend, and then we must meet our goals for the how we can reduce the carbon emissions. But unfortunately, Kim Moon-soo and Lee Jun-seok says nothing about that. Also, while the candidate Kim Moon-soo says a nuclear-led strategy, and he said 60% of our energy should be like a based on nuclear energy, it seems like some kind of copy of the former President Yoon Suk-yeol. Also, that remind me like former President Yoon Suk-yeol never understood about the renewable energy 100%. So I think still the PPP, also Kim Moon-soo has not realized what world and global is now has a trend. So I think this is a very critical moment. I think in the part of the environment issue, South Korea should be survive with this global trend because it is all related to our economy. We sell the semiconductor, we sell the something is based on the renewable energy 100%. I think that Lee Jae-myung and maybe Democrat Party they says about that, but I cannot say anything about from the PPP and Lee Jun-seok. So that's very unfortunate. So I think that this is a very critical issue because we are industrialized and we are number 13th in the world in the economy. So I think that we must maybe keep our goals for how we can reduce our emission in the future.
Right. So this energy issue is really important, and South Korea's energy future, of course, would be decided by the ballot, whether through renewables or nuclear or something that's yet to be decided. So we'll have to keep close eyes on that front. But I'm afraid we will have to conclude our discussion for now at this point. Thank you so much for your insights, Attorney An.
Thank you.
And of course, Professor Che, we appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.